hello, and welcome to another episode of Mental Health Monday with the lovely Anna, and I am Bryon. And we like to, at the top nowadays, remind you that we are just normal folks. We are not doctors, we are not anything other than what I would say normal human beings, and normal is a very subjective word, but we've been through a lot, and we're here to share our experiences and what we've gone through and give you a more relatable angle on the mental health game where there's a lot of words and verbiage and just where you hear from doctors and people, and we're the ones that want to give you what really works for us and just experiences that can help and you can find helpful for you. And today, our lovely episode is going to be about self awareness and identity and who we are beyond our survival patterns. And to kind of give us a little intro and kind of give us a little update on what we've been talking about and what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to throw it over to the lovely Anna.
Thank you, Bryon. So, last episode we talked about the difference between insight and integration, how awareness alone doesn't automatically create change, how we need to actively work towards any changes that we wish to make in our life, and how healing often requires practicing new responses in real life. But as we begin changing long held patterns, another question often starts to come up, which is if I'm no longer responding the way that I always have or that I typically have in the past, then who am I really? We start to reinvent or create a new or modified version of our identity. So today we're exploring self-awareness, identity, and what it can look like to reconnect with ourselves beyond those old patterns and coping roles.
Yeah, it's something that I've experienced a lot with lately, so this is a good topic. Just being able to handle different situations that we talked about in the last couple episodes, but just like any situation in any sort of regard of if it's work, personal, or other, we kind of we try to work and have better responses than our natural reaction, knee jerk reactions, and stuff like that. So how we kind of reflect on that, and then we come at the situation in a better way is definitely where we become out of it and start to realize. I think I read something very helpful today just on your first reaction is going to be knee jerk, your second reaction is going to be more thought through, and by the third time, you're going to be more in the lane that you want to be when you're interacting with people and dealing with situations. So this hits that right on the head on what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about identity, a lot of different things can identify us, and that can change over time. I can think of times different roles that I've been, different jobs that I've been in, as well as different hobbies and pastimes, and it's become my identity or a big part of my identity. And so this episode is really just to take a step back and to see, okay, is this how I want to continue to identify myself? And who am I without these different things? Who am I underneath all the different roles that I've played, any patterns that I may have repeated over the years? To take that create that self-awareness to see, and then to go forward and say, okay, do I want to continue on this path? Bryon, can you think of any different times where you've really identified yourself through a particular role that you played or a situation and whatnot,
Oh
where
yeah,
it's led over?
yeah. My whole life I've been a people pleaser, so there's been playing that game a long time for sure. There is inherent things about being in the middle child and all that stuff, and that's always the great story of things like that where you have to feel like you have to belong in a role of making everybody happy and doing the right thing at all accounts and costs. And that's definitely something on this journey that I've had to deal with head on, and I still continue to deal with every day. I still love making people happy, but you have to know your limits and know what you can handle. And that's what a lot of this is about. Definitely a role I've fit into is just being the people pleaser, overachieving, hyperfixation, where my ADHD and OCD come in, and a lot of these things that we feel and we react towards relationships to fit in, as you were saying, is a great example of that. But we can start with the people pleasing, and that's definitely something that I have to watch myself because of how many times I've hurt myself by being a people pleaser And when we have to assign ourselves some roles with people and how we decide to be in friendships, relationships, and anything, like you said, social or interests and all that stuff, you kind of find your roles within your groups and things like that. And people pleasing has definitely been one of mine that I work on constantly just because I want to make people happy, but you have to, at what expense is really where it comes down to, where you drain yourself and it's not very helpful for you at the end of the day, and you're wondering why you're feeling so drained or feel so emotionally just drawn out. And that's definitely something that I've experienced pretty much my whole life until recently when I've been able to really push back and say no or and not feel guilty. But that takes a lot of work and practice and realizing and recognizing and looking deep into why I have those tendencies and why I feel like I need to be that way with people.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really comes from a place, a good place, a place of care. You care about people and you want to then also make sure that they're happy, taken care of, that kind of thing, as well as just how good it feels when you make somebody happy. So any of these things, it's like it comes from really, it could come from many different things, environments, relationships, responsibilities, emotional experiences, things that happen in our day-to-day lives. And it may be necessary at times where we're like overgiving at different times because of a need, a special need. But like you're saying, to have that balance and to ensure that you yourself are taken care of too, because you really can't pour from an empty well. You have to make sure to leave some for yourself. Yeah, like the people pleasing part too. For me, it comes also too wanting to I just care about people and wanting to make sure that people are taken care of, that I am helpful and I can give to them, but also to making sure that I'm taken care of and I don't overextend myself so I don't burn out because that's not good for anybody.
Nope, and do I know it very well myself. But then we kind of have to draw the line and kind of dig into it a little bit on where we stand with people. And just like I always say, that's just my personality. He's just the nicest guy ever, all these other things. And you really have to find out if you're doing it for yourself or for the reason of making other people happy. Because there's the thing right there when you're trying to make other people happy, which is definitely okay to do. It can be somewhat of your personality, but you have to understand where the line in the sand is, and it gets murky and it gets definitely crossed many times and millions of times in my experiences and everything like that. But there is the room to grow, to give yourself space to be able to push back in situations like that and not really rely on the things that maybe your personality or people know you for because you're trying to fit into the role that you're given, or you're trying to deal with a relationship where you're trying to figure out what's best to be the person that gives too much or gives their time and everything else. And it might be one of what you think is your personality or something like that, but you really have to base your judgments and look into your own time. And you'll start to see, because as I start to push back and not be as people pleasing as I was before, people still love you because they know that you care, because you've shown that you care. But it doesn't have to make up your whole identity. And that's what we're talking about here, is things that we do to cope or to be within a relationship doesn't have to overtake our whole personality or everything, because when we're not giving ourselves, we're actually taking away from ourselves by doing too much. And I think what we do as humans is just to try to make everything okay, everything's good, but we forget about ourselves in those situations a lot, where we do whatever the relationship needs rather than what we need, because that seems like the easy way out that we've done a million times. We fold into the pressure of what I need to be doing to make this relationship work, right? But there's always the relationship that we're negating is ourself, and then it hurts us in the long run. And I am a big example of that, of how long it took me to just step back and be able to have some boundaries and be able to say, hey, I enjoy making people happy, but there's a way that I can do this healthier. And then that's when we, just like how we have reactions to people and situations, we have to analyze, and then we over time we practice. And just like how it's taken me time to give very important people in my life a little back of what I need as well, and not just take on what they need. And then I start to feel better about my mental health and feel better and feel good. And then that's where we land a lot more balanced than we were before. And we don't feel so stressed out. We don't feel so overwhelmed because we're not fitting into this thing that we think we need to do to be in relationships or have relationships with certain people. And then it becomes easier to have other relationships because this is all about practice and being able to do more for yourself so that you can be more to other people. As simple as I can put it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's really that what you're saying is having that reflection. It's having that reflection in pretty much everything that we do. And that doesn't mean, oh, okay, I'm going to do something and then reflect upon it immediately, but just checking in with ourselves on a periodic basis to see, okay, am I on point with where I want to go, with how I want to respond or act, and who I want to be in this lifetime. And looking into some of these conditioned or different styles and responses, it's so easy to get with anything. It's so easy to get into a habit of just doing it. And then we look back, we're like, oh, wow, who did I become? And how do I want to change this? Like overachieving, that can be that identity that we create for ourselves with overachieving and perfectionism can start at a really young age, especially because we get that positive feedback, which is dopamine, back from caregivers, back from teachers and others to recognize us for doing well at something or everything. But is it sustainable? That's a thing. Is yes, you want to be your best self, but is what you're doing sustainable for you in the long term? Like overachieving, that's one of the that's one of the things that I have had to deal with for many years, and it's because I want to do really well in whatever I do. But really well is very fluid. It could be really one day, could be just working on that task and getting a little bit further. It doesn't mean completing the whole thing and having it done shiny and new the very next day. So, really having that give and take to see, okay, how am I responding? How am I showing up in different areas of life? Caretaking, that's another thing that we could, if say you are in a role, you're having to care for a parent or a loved one, does that bleed into other areas of your life where you see yourself being the one to care for everybody else around you? And that just may be where nobody's asking that of you, but you just inherently step into that role because you may be in that role for on a daily basis, having to care for somebody else. And that's really hard. It's really hard to deal with. And then to have it go into other areas of your life and you start to lose yourself that way. The same thing like emotional shutdown, you and hyper independence. So, emotional shutdown, these are all just examples, but maybe at a young age, you had to really protect yourself from inconsistency with a caregiver or from any kind of situation that you've dealt with. And so that ends up becoming what your coping mechanism is. It's okay if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling all these different emotions, and you just end up shutting down when you feel that later in life, but it may not be nearly what you're dealing with later in life as what you did as a child. And hyper independence, the same thing. It's, oh, I can't trust people. So I can't trust my caregivers. I can't trust different people in different scenarios. You learn that over time, and so you become hyper independent and you learn how to trust yourself in all situations where that may be good in some areas, depending upon the situation, but also too, find people around you that you can also rely on. So having that interdependence and count on trusted people who have shown up regularly for you and who are willing to show up for you. But over time, these responses can stop feeling like strategies and start feeling like this is who we are. It's I'm the responsible one. I'm always the strong one. I'm just bad at relationships. And I'm the person who keeps everyone okay, who keeps the whole thing together, who keeps the family unit together. So it could show up in different areas of your life. But that's where it's like we're wanting to discuss today, taking what a past role is, or even a current one, and seeing, okay, this is the role or this is the actions, but is it my whole identity? And really separating the two.
Yeah, that's a great way to really break that down because we all do find ourselves to kind of merge into our role. And then we say these key phrases just as our personality traits. Like I was saying, this is my job. I keep everyone together. I do this, I do that. And there's a lot to that when we unpack it. That's what we're trying to say today is if you find yourself in these patterns or you tend to be this type of person or you just find yourself just feeling like you're giving your all the time, there's definitely reasons behind that, and there's a lot of ways that you can definitely wear yourself out without you realizing because it's just normal things that you've had since childhood, like we talked about, perfectionism and like overachieving and things like that, which I know that's definitely dopamine is like my whole life. I just chased dopamine and I've had to find that out the hard way, but I'm always looking for positive reinforcements here and then I'm doing a good job and stuff like that. But that's just like when we dig deeper and find out like, wow, like that's why I'm like that, or like I need to like just accept myself. And then like you said, like I just have to say like what each day looks different. You know what I mean? And that's definitely been something that I work on every day is okay, I don't have to be 120% today. I can be 60%, and that's okay because that's what I can give. You are being your authentic self rather than giving too much and giving yourself a chance to not be irritable or really just feeling like maybe some of these things can change and I don't have to feel this way by recognizing that you're giving too much or like falling into these roles that we often do because that's the norm or what we're used to. But when we take a look back at, okay, this feels like too much, this is where we like hone in on like finding out where we stand with things. And like you said, you got to find the right people to have around you that can push back in a way of when you feel overwhelmed, you can say something and be able to have good communication to be able to say, hey, like I'm losing it over here. I'm trying so hard to keep this afloat. And if they don't come back at you with good energy, then you're finding out, okay, see, the 80/20 doesn't work. And then you start to realize, and then you start to feed yourself about, okay, what do I need to do to be okay to be here in any sort of relationship? You just got to be able to find your levels so that you're not going on zero all the time and wondering why you're losing yourself and not being able to identify I wasn't like this before I got in this situation and things like that. There's a lot to that. And that's where we try to find out and give you guys examples so that we can say, hey, I feel like that. I understand that I lose myself when I'm taking care of somebody way too much, or I'm overgiving at work or overachieving, or why am I like so stressed out like all the time? And that's something I deal with all the time, like just feeling like I'm not doing enough. And some days I have to slow myself down and say, hey, you're just you're feeding into your OCD and you're feeding into your ADHD and you're doing okay. And even if you don't accomplish everything, you're still accomplishing something. And that's not easy to do. And it's definitely taken time, but it's definitely something that feeds me that I had to recognize and I still continue to work on it every day to say, hey, it's okay. That lovely word that we have, what is it? Grace. We have to give ourselves grace. Along with other relationships, we have to give grace as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so easy to get lost in there. And I think really what matters is the responses that we give are not necessarily unhealthy at all times. They're not inherently unhealthy just because it exists, like a pattern that we notice. But what matters is whether it remains flexible, intentional, and is appropriate for the current situation in the context in which it's applied to. If I am an overachiever in one area, like in say in work, am I trying to overachieve in all areas of my life? Is that intentional? Is it appropriate in that environment? Is it appropriate in every task that I do? Not necessarily. And so having that self awareness or working, and this is a regular daily thing that we have to work on. It's not just, oh, I arrived and I have all these great patterns now. I have this great identity now. It's constantly evolving because we're constantly shifting and changing and adapting to different situations and scenarios. But so it's not really just the rule itself, it's when it becomes rigid, automatic, and overextended into different environments and becomes our entire identity. So one nuance to note is that not every response that we repeat is something that we consciously chose. I kind of hinted at that, and I believe you did as well, as far as we can oftentimes develop different habits and strategies different times of our lives, not necessarily always in childhood, but different times over our lives. And seeing, okay, is this an automatic response that I have? And even though it may not look like the same situation as it did in previous situations, are there similarities? Is this something that I intentionally chose, or is it just an automatic trigger response that I have? Do I automatically shut down whenever I feel very overwhelmed, and say in work, in relationships, in traffic or whatnot? There's a lot of different things to see there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think it is good to know, like, self awareness is definitely something we're going to preach a lot. And then just understanding what is real and what is yourself. You know what I mean? There's what is the matter of the fact, which is the concept of the situation you're in, and what is the self awareness of, I tend to be this way. This seems like something that I'm doing rather than the situation is doing, right? So there's the two sides of the coin always. But once we kind of self reflect and self look at our self awareness, then we can see, okay, that is my tendency. That is something that I do. And then that's when you discover and go deep dive on that. But when you're doing that, you'll be able to like a list of, okay, this is like what the relationship happens when I do this. And then it boils it down so you can look at the two sides of the coin of like, when I'm doing this happens on this side. If I'm giving too much, the other person doesn't give as much and I feel drained. So you can look at both things. And then as we've stated on here, homework outside of school doesn't seem fun, but it's very well worth it in situations like this because that's how we find out what we can actually, what's affecting us, what we do, and then what they do. And that goes for any type of relationship, work, serious, romantic, anything. You have to find out where the comfortable middle is, but you have to understand where you come from. So your self awareness about yourself and what you bring to the table, and then what the situation has on the table already, so that you can see how much of yourself you're given. That's work, that's everything. Like how much you're really giving is definitely gonna teeter on how situations in relationships matter to you because you're gonna have a lot to look at when you break things down. And as much as we seem like life goes so fast and we just go through it and it's just, this is what it is, this is like we talked about just a little bit ago. It's just like, I tend to be the one that gets everybody together. I do this and I do that. And it's just, that's who I am. And then you realize, and that's why you're stressed out every time you do that. You know what I mean? There's reasons behind this that we don't really recognize because we've just been doing it for so long. But we have to take a
Yeah.
look at ourselves and the concept and everything else that we're looking at, like what we're dealing with, is something to take a moment and just look at, and then look at ourselves and look at the situation, and that's and the relationship, and then that's how we start to break things down and see where our tendencies are and like where we fall in a lot of these ways and where we can find that little bit of room to start to make it better for ourselves and make the situation and relationships even better by going, okay, I see what's going on here, because we don't do that a lot. That's one thing that us humans are just go, go, go. But once we start to slow down and look at things, there's ways to just break it down. And it's not going to happen overnight, but you can start to implement these things and say, hey, how about you set up the family meeting? How about I'll be there then? I'm feeling very overwhelmed and I can't handle this right now. And if they're your people, they're going to understand and go, all right, it's not my usual thing. There might be a 20 million different reactions, and they might be good, bad, but you find out a lot once you start to say, hey, this is how I'm honestly feeling, and this is what I need. And that's when we start to stand up for ourselves and be able to be in relationships of any kind, helping and serving ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. There's two nuggets that I got from what you just said. And need, knowing and identifying your own needs. And that can be different in different situations. So thinking self awareness is really, what am I thinking? What emotions am I having? What patterns do I have in different scenarios? What are my needs? What are my triggers? What are my behaviors? And really, like you said, seeing, okay, how can you work with those people? What's already on the table? What is the task at hand? What is needed in that situation? And what each party can bring to the table. So if you're, like, say, for instance, trying to get a group of people together, and you're always the one who gets everybody together, who's always, okay, in the group chat, we organize, you're the one who typically organizes it, but you're so overwhelmed and you are the one who typically handles everything. Okay, who else could possibly assist with these different things? And see, okay, who can assist with this task? Who can assist with that one? And that really helps to build, it takes some of that work off of your plate and helps to slowly break that kind of pattern. But it also helps you to see who may be able to step up in those different times and brings everybody closer together in the long run, because there are people that want to help. They just didn't realize. They may not have realized, oh, this is what your need was. Oh, this is what you're dealing with right now. Absolutely, sure, I can help. And so expressing those needs, like you're saying, is so valuable, and it brings people closer together because you're working as a unit then versus one person handling all the different things. The same thing with a team at work. Okay, you want to disperse the different tasks on a project. That helps to create a cohesive team oftentimes, versus everybody is going to be handling their own thing. And so, yeah, it really helps to create that interdependence.
Yeah, I think what you find as we start to shift, as we start to heal and understand what we need more in situations and relationships, is just things might change. And the tough part is, as humans, as neurodivergent person, change is scary and it's hard. You might not get the response you're hoping for, which is something that's happened to me many times. But as we go through these things, we find out like the roles start to change, and your role within your work situation, your romantic situation, your just friendships, like it starts to change. But there's positives to that, but there's always going to be growing pains for you and the people around you. So when we say, hey, start to discover yourself, hey, start to pinpoint these things that are bothering you or aren't you're just doing it because that's what you've done your whole life, because these are just inherent things that you've learned through your childhood and all the way up until how old you are right now. You just take things on because that's what you know, and you don't even know that you're doing it. And then you start to look into things and you're like, hey, I am just overachieving. I am just like stressing myself out by just taking care of everybody and not caring about myself. There will be difficult times within we do while taking this on, when but it's very important, and that's why we mention it and talk about it, is because there's going to be uncomfortableness. There's going to be like not feeling like you know yourself. Hey, like I used to not push back, and people used to be like, oh great, they'll just do that and they'll just do this, and then you start to push back and they're like, why are you what? And then you're going to get mixed feelings. And the best part about that is when we feel uncomfortable, we start to move in directions that make us feel comfortable. So we have to push ourselves sometimes. And this is one of those opportunities where we're going to feel like we've lost ourselves, or maybe we get to have the normal feelings of grieving who you used to be. Like my old self was a people pleaser. I still am, but I used to be too. But it's better now because I've taken the chance to really put an effort in. But it's also just being okay with those feelings. There's a lot of feelings that you're going to feel guilt because you are usually the one who gets pushed over, but you're pushing back to say, hey, I can't do that. There's going to be guilt because you're not used to that feeling. So the uncomfortableness is going to be there. And then, especially when you're used to doing everything like people pleasers like we are, we don't feel as needed. We feel less useful when we're not doing everything. And I know that. And I look at you and I know you know that. Just because we try to push back and try to feel better about ourselves, we start to lose ourselves because we're like, hey, like that's what we did and that's gave us dopamine, what we talk about. But there's really a lot of value in being able to adjust and have healthier relationships because you're able to see that you're doing too much. And a lot of people do too much. And then you look at other people, and I'm jealous that people don't do anything. There's the people that really have an opposite end of what we're feeling. And if you're that person, this is the cry for help of you to hear the people on the other end say, hey, we are doing a lot. And I don't need you to do what I'm doing, but I need you to do something. So we're going to feel different. We're going to feel weird. We're going to feel guilty. We're going to feel all these things. And I run through these emotions every day. Like I really do. Like I have to deal with these in different ways, different relationships, all across the board. But what I found out about myself while healing is it's okay to feel those things because at the end of the day, you are serving yourself and those uncomfortableness and the things that kind of get you out of your like, this isn't normally what I'm like. It turns into this is just what I'm like and I'm a better version of myself. And then we have to go through uncomfortable to get to comfortable. And then we get to a place where we can be a little bit more while doing less. Because at the end of the day, you are only you and you're going to be able to be that person and you're always going to be that person, but you're going to be able to do it easier. You're not going to have so much on your plate. And I yell at myself all the time. Like I do. I have so much internal dialogue of just talking to myself and being like, hey, you didn't do a lot today. It's okay. It's really okay because you're going to do something tomorrow. And then but you did stuff today. You got to look at the things and the accomplishments that you've done and the situations you've done and how you dealt with it. And it helps because then you're like, hey, I'm not killing myself over it. And then that's what we do as people that overthink and overachieve. We strike ourselves down and we are our own worst critics. So once we kind of give ourselves a little bit of that G word, that grace, we feel a little bit different. But just understand there's going to be uncomfortable feelings. And when we're changing for the better and when we're feeling things differently, there's a reason for that. And we're going to feel those things. We're going to feel uncomfortable and weird. And that's not normally me. And I can't believe they reacted that way. But we find out so much in those situations. So that's why we do it. And we might lose some people, we might gain some people, but there's a lot to gain for yourself. And that's what we're trying to tell and be relatable here is that I've been uncomfortable a million times and I will continue to be uncomfortable by the rest of my life. I know that because I'm an uncomfortable person at times. But what I found is when I'm myself and my true self, I feel way better about being uncomfortable than I do with being overworked, overachieving, and overgiving and uncomfortable. So there's
Yeah,
that. You can replace some of that with just that's who I am, but in a good way. So just
yeah,
remind yourself it's not easy and there is going to be bumps in the roads. Mental health is bumps in the roads and then we just keep going and then we find our ways through the bumps. That's really how this goes.
yeah, yeah. Really, anytime that we change something in our lives, it's gonna feel weird and it's gonna feel uncomfortable. And saying that's just how I am and making that switch of vocabulary, that small switch of instead of saying this is just who I am, this is just how I am, saying to yourself, this is how I have shown up before, or something along those lines. This is, yeah, I'm good at this, and I play this role in this scenario, but it doesn't identify who I am. I know one of the things that I have to continuously remind myself of is instead of going all the time, making intentional time to rest. yes, there's always going to be so many different things to do, but it doesn't all need to get done today. And having that guilt of that productivity has been something that I have to check myself on several times a day to see, okay, yes, I've gotten some things done. It's been great. It has been productive. But sometimes the most productive thing that we can do is to take some time to rest and recalibrate, because then our mind is at rest as well and can be more creative and thoughtful and can actually do a better job when, because it had some time to rest and recalibrate. And so really sometimes the most productive thing that we could do is that. And so it's these things, it's not saying okay, do less necessarily, but how can I be more, how can I show up as the version of myself that I want? Having that intentional action and having that become your identity. I act intentionally. I act instead of I act out of impulse, out of my just what I've done in the past.
Yeah, what feels comfortable is not going to be always the right thing to do. And if you've gotten through this many episodes, you've definitely have heard us say how many times we've stumbled and fallen over and hurt ourselves by continuing to just try to do what's comfortable or what feels normal, what roles that we've assigned ourselves by what we know is safe and normal and regular, where we find ourselves reliving patterns and roles that we didn't really agree to, but we found ourselves in by doing the things like overachieving, overthinking, overgiving, caregiving, all the things that we kind of gave examples to earlier. There's reasons that we do that because we've found ourselves to be helpful in those situations and to be comfortable in those situations. But like you said, you have to give yourself grace in the sense of the guilt that you feel for not doing a million trillion things. And I almost had to cut you off because of my ADHD and say, hey, you're like, there's always something to do. There's a million things to do. And I wanted to be like, yeah, and I can list all of the things that I have to do and everything else. And like, but the reality is, I wanted to make a point about that is just one of my mantras or just something that I tell myself every day is what can I control right now? What can I control today? What can I control in the moment? What if there's something lingering down the road? Let's give space and room for that to come up and have time to do that. But if it's not anything I could tackle today, or if I do something today that's going to affect that, then there should be room and grace to not dwell, overthink, overachieve on some of these things that don't need to take my energy, where I can take that energy and just have the energy. I think that's something that we're not portraying enough is that even if you're doing nothing, instead of doing too much, you're literally just saving and conserving energy to have. And it's way better than feeling like you have no energy ever. So there's totally benefits here. So we got to find where we've stuck ourselves in these roles and patterns and this is what we are and this is what we do type things to say, hey, that's not really who I am. I really could use some effing help. I could use some assistance here and not just be the one. Because I feel like we, at the end of the day, put a lot of blame on ourselves and guilt, like you said, where we don't need to. We got to find what our values are, what our interests are. When we have more time for ourselves, we invest in ourselves more. And that's what we find. We find out what our preferences are, what we really are feeling, like true feelings, instead of overgiving where we run out of steam before we can even get to the part where we're like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good right now. We don't get to that because we're just like, I'm fucking fudging tired. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm tired, but it's because there's reasons for that. But we got to have to really look at things and study and be like, where's my values? Where's my interests? What is this happening within these relationships that I can be like, hey, where do I begin with me and what I need or what is going on here? It's just, and we don't do that a lot because we're comfortable and we just do because that's what we do. And as much as you're saying, like, I got a million things to do and everything else, and we got to find out what's true more than just what's automatic. What's real or what's your automatic response, or what you normally go to? And then what choices come from fear, or just this is where I need to be? And fear leads us in a lot of ways, but there's got to be a balance where we can say, hey, I don't want to just say yes to something because that's normally what I do when I'm feeling like this is going to overwhelm me. Because if we take a moment, like we say, just give ourselves some time, say, hey, I need a minute to think about this, then you could make your knee jerk reaction be less based in fear, more than you could be aligned with yourself and find out what's a middle ground we can come to, what's a compromise, and then what's fulfilling to you, or is this just like familiar? We need to break apart from familiar if we're not fulfilling ourselves. But once we become to a point where we can do both, then we're doing something right, because we're fulfilling ourselves and fulfilling others. And that's where you find balance, and that you're not just running 80-20 in relationships. No matter what kind of relationships we have, we just have to become self aware of, hey, I can't do 80-20. Let's start at 70-30, and let's work our way, and let's find a happy balance that I'm not giving 80-20, because that's how we start to fix things and start to get in a, if you're in a slump, there's correlation to that. If you can start pushing back and getting a little bit more from other people and maybe getting disappointing results, but at the end of the day you start fulfilling your cup up a little bit more, you're not giving so much out, you can start giving to yourself and be able to understand, hey, I got nothing to do right now. That's pretty awesome. You know what I mean? There's benefits to having, standing up for yourself and being able to say, it was uncomfortable for a while, but now things are great because I'm able to just have 15 minutes where I was going and picking somebody up or doing something that was just me overexerting myself in any sort of relationship, where I wasn't doing what I really could. I was just doing what I felt I had to do or was familiar or automatic. And then we can stop and go, hey, I can't do that. And I know that we can probably figure this out. So I'm not doing everything. Like,
Yeah.
as much as that feels good, and I love to be in control, as my therapist would tell you, you have to find balance where you can't control everything, and you got to be able to share the power and in all relationships, and not just give everything that you give yourself. And us being people pleasers, I know that we do that way too much. So I don't know if you have anything more to say to that.
Yeah, I thought of a couple of different things. Like, it's God bless parents, any caregivers in general, because if you're caring for another human being, if you're having entrusted to care for another human being on a daily basis, that takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of time. And it may be unrelenting, but you also have to have that time for yourself too. I think of it that exercise where you have a jar and you have bigger rocks and pebbles and sand, and you want to make sure that you have time that you put in those bigger rocks first. Those symbolize the most important things in your life, what you value the most, the things that mean the most to you, that are most fulfilling and that mean the most to you. You want to put those in first, because if you put the pebbles and the sand in first, then you won't have time for those big ones. So and I was thinking about your creative endeavors as well as mine too. So one thing is always making sure that we have some time to practice those things. We're doing them also a lot of times in conjunction with other people, in collaboration with other people. And so that kind of assists the situation. You have regular practices, you have different practice towards that, and making that part of our daily routine is having those interests, making sure that we have time for those big rocks, and that those are part of our identity as well. They may not be the whole identity, but making sure, okay, that is part of my identity. And yeah, okay, I'm also identifying as part of, this is my work and this is this and this is that, but it doesn't become our whole identity there. And so really having that time for, or making that time for the things that are most important. And that, like you're saying, requires different flex in different areas. So yeah, you may want to be there for every event for the people that you love in your life, but it may not always be work out that way. And yes, technically you may be able to make most of those times and you may be able to make an event, but even though you want to attend something, it may not be the best for you at that moment because maybe you have a lot else going on and you need that time to rest and recoup, or you need that time to dedicate to another project that you've been putting off. So, yeah, having that flexibility, and that may adjust the relationship, like we were talking about, or it may adjust how you show up or you show up in other scenarios later. But while it can be a little scary, it can also be very empowering because then you could see, as you're saying, okay, because I flexed on that, now I have a little bit of time to do this that I really care about as well. So having that flexibility and making because our identities are multifaceted. We are multifaceted beings. And we aren't just one thing or the other. Thinking about a job. If you're in a job for any extended period of time, you may identify as that job. What happens when you lose that job? And it's okay, where's your identity then? So it's really being able to spread ourselves out amongst all the things, the roles that we play, the patterns that we have, how we show up, but not spread ourselves out too thinly.
Yeah, I like my peanut butter mildly spread in the sense, maybe medium. I don't like a thin. I don't like too much, but I like just the right, probably like a medium spread of peanut butter. I feel like is a good way to say what you're
Yes,
saying.
yes,
And the important thing is to not lose yourself. There's a lot of people and humans that do lose themselves in their identities that they find through work, relationships, and everything else. And those fall the hardest, and we're trying to keep you from falling hard so that you so you can recognize that, hey, I really got away from this, I really got away from that, but that really made me happy, that really made me feel fulfilled, and like things like that. And we're not saying you just like, okay, I gotta be this different person, I gotta do that stuff that I like doing all the time, and I gotta do this. No, it's incremental, and it's just like finding the time here and there, and then that starts to grow as you start to give space and time and those things, that you can be able to build up more time into those things once you start to give yourself space and room in relationships that you're over giving. There's just, it's very difficult, but there's got to be ways that we can have boundaries and ways to do things and feel comfortable, because that's the thing, we're going to feel uncomfortable, but then we're going to be able to reconnect with ourselves in ways that help us grow. And all those little pebbles that we're putting in between the big rocks start to fit a lot better when we start to say, this is what I enjoy and this is what I need to stay sane. Like, I'm in two bands, I do this podcast, I have a group of people that I have a community with, and I have relationships and everything else, and a lot of friends. And I manage a lot of that by saying, hey, like, this is important to me and I need to do this because music is my outlet, my friends are my outlet. These are big boulders. Like my work, I don't have a big fancy job, but it fits in the pebbles that go around the big rocks to make my life feel fulfilling, in the sense of there's a lot of chance for me to do things that I make me feel good, and that's the dopamine. But there's also a good balance there. Like, we find the balance within the relationships that we find, and we can serve ourselves by starting to analyze those things and give yourself the best chance to say, hey, I'm going to leave this hangout a little early so I can go home and play guitar or something. There's 5 minutes there that turn into more time later because you're like, hey, I put some time to myself and that was awesome. Like, I really enjoyed that. I got to do that more often. These are like incremental changes that will affect relationships and really be different, but it's going to be different in a good way, where we can find how to make that jar full of big rocks and small sand and little pebbles work and feel like it's not going to break the glass that it's in. There's really potential to be able to do that. And you got to make sure that your foundations are there. And the only way you're going to find out about those foundations is by finding out what parts and what things align with you to make every day tolerable. There's always something that I can look forward to, but that's because I put in the work to show myself that. There's there's depressions that I've been in that last months long where every day just feels miserable. But then I started working on things and started to go, hey, not really playing music as much as I'd like to. Hey, like I need to like interact with people more. There's just steps we take and it takes time, and then like you're putting off this thing, you're putting off that thing in different relationships and situations, but at the end all be all, they'll all come back together and be able to be unified if that's the right choice for the universe that puts you there. And that's where we find a lot of happiness, is where we can make everything fit in a good way where there's good balance. Not everything's going to be perfect and rainbows and roads and everything else. It's going to be darkness and all the feelings, all the emotions. We're going to go through everything, but there's going to be a better balance once we start to weed out the things that are kind of, we're giving ourselves too much. Like we start to go, hey, let's shake that up a little bit. All right, we're having some weird, I feel uncomfortable. Okay, now I'm starting to feel comfortable. There's always going to be waves. They keep hitting, right? That's what I always say.
Yeah,
They're always going to be hitting, but once we know that they're hitting, we just keep going and smashing our heads right in the waves because it's just it's not going to stop. So we just keep going, but we
yeah,
find the balance. It's a very important thing to find the balance and what makes you instead of the things that you do to please others. You can find what you genuinely like, and we all chase dopamine, like I said. So we got to find, hey, I need to do that, but I also need to do something for myself so that we feel like we're doing enough and we are enough. And that's one thing that I preach all the time to my friends, and including Anna, is that you are enough. You are one of one. And once people start to realize that, there's a lot of reasons to not like the one of one, but you are one of one and you're only that person. And there's a lot to accept there. And there's a lot of beautiful things to realize that you might stumble, you might fall, but if you get back up again, you're still that one of one. And that's why you're here.
yeah, yeah. One thing too, and I know I touched on it, but to make very clear is that we're not saying to neglect any responsibilities. Some of the things that we have in our lives are very much needed. People rely on us, like children, elderly. There's certain responsibilities that we have to people. And yes, those are needed. And we don't, you need to attend to those. But also to seeing, okay, if you if we see ourselves burnt out in doing and how we're doing that and how we're caring for somebody or what we are doing in a scenario, just to think, okay, what are my resources and what are some of my possibly unknown resources, and how could I possibly adjust some things so that I am still giving the proper care that I need to this individual or to this situation without completely taking away from myself and taking away from my identity and who I am. So it's really that flux there. And with anything too, our nervous system, it tends to prefer predictability. So we start to do one thing and then we get into the habit of doing it. It's just innate. That's just how things operate. We get into habits and say staying up too late, staying up later than we wanted to. We get into a habit of doing that. And you're like, oh gosh, why am I staying up till this time? And our nervous system is okay with it because it is what is gotten used to. And so breaking any kind of patterns and having that unpredictability, it, as we mentioned, it feels scary. And but that's change. Change will make that, it'll make you feel scary. It'll make things feel scary at that time, but then we'll recalibrate and adjust to the new norm. Although I hate that term, the new normal that we created in our lives, that we intentionally created in our lives. That intentionality and that reassessment is really where it's at. And we can reconnect with ourselves and check ourselves in many different ways on a regular basis. Like you said, noticing preferences, checking in ourselves emotionally, our boundaries, allowing ourselves to rest, seeing, okay, what do I need? What is true to me here? How am I responding from fear, habit, or authenticity? Considering all those things before commit, like considering all those things, say, before committing to something or someone in a scenario, looking at all those things. What do I need in this situation? What do I need today? Do I need to do this today? Not necessarily. Can I put it off till tomorrow? Yeah. So really checking in those different things to see what we need as well as what is needed at that time and how necessary it is.
Yeah, it's very important, and you definitely touched on something that I will reiterate as well. I'm not telling you to pack all your stuff into a book bag and go to Hawaii and live on the beach because that's where the dopamine is and that feels good and you need to do things for yourself. I'm talking about things that we can control and within our own lives that we have set up already and what we choose to do moving forward. So it's all about incremental, it's all about just finding yourself, reassuring yourself, and making sure that you can stay grounded more than you were when you were giving too much, and just being hopeful that things can be able to be changed and you're able to be feeling like your big stones and little pebbles are aligning in the most perfect way because you've really worked hard to put everything in very carefully, and those get knocked over, those get, life happens. So we're not saying chase dopamine and just live happily ever after. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying try to have your daily relationships serve you just a little bit better, and incremental changes that may be scary are going to help you in the long run. And that's what we're trying to be relatable to you, is to show you that with deep diving, finding out and giving yourself time to even deep dive or think about these things more than just passing moments, that when things happen, we can really do things that are beautiful that help us become happier, better, mentally stable in a way that we can sustain like happiness, whatever that is to you, or a little bit more joy out of things that seem very stressful. I know the world is very stressful. So when we find little bits of joy and being able to just fight for yourself in a way of keeping things good, but also not doing too much is very important to that equation to make yourself feel more balanced in life and be able to feel the highs and lows in a more enduring way where you can take the lows because you're not in them the whole time, or you can take the highs when you're in the lows because then you can feel them rather than just going through everything like, yeah, this is going to suck, that sucks, this sucks. There's a lot to it when you can say, hey, like, I get to go home, I got 15 minutes, I can just sit there on the couch and just be okay with not doing anything and just think about stuff. Sometimes that's all you need, and that's really way more helpful than a lot of things that we do and choose to spend our time on. And once we start to fight for ourselves, we're going to be able to know that. So we have to self assess, realize that this is going to be helpful, and we can be hopeful for the future as we do things slightly to build up to be in a better spot. We're going to be okay. We're going to ground ourselves, and you're more than your roles. You're more than the patterns that you tend to do. You're going to be more than the responses and reactions that we have. Our nervous system, as we've talked about in past episodes, are very mean and aren't very nice at times. But that's a part of us that we learn about and we can be better about once we go, hey, like, I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to be a jerk. What we'll say here is just like awareness helps us realize the roles that we learn to play. A lot of inherent stuff that we learn through childhood, adulthood, womanhood, manhood, all the hoods, the ghetto hoods, all the hoods. We love the hoods. So it's just we can reconnect with the person that we find to be true to ourselves, and we can actually play and be a little more joyous than feeling like we have to do so much, because I know at the end of the day that's the stressful part about life, is we have to do this, we have to do that. But when we give ourselves grace to be able to know that when we start to organize things and put things in places where we can have a little bit more space than just feeling overwhelmed all the time because of our own expectations and our patterns and our roles that we assign ourselves or people assign to us. And we go, hey, that's not truly me. We really find ourselves to be fighting for ourselves to be like, hey, feel pretty good about that. Might feel uncomfortable for a little bit, but I think I'm feeling better. And that's all we really want to do is to have you feel better and share our experiences to make you feel better and us feel better. And just to say, hey, it is possible. And from somebody that's been in the dumps to on top of skyscrapers, I know all the feelings and the feels, and it's tough, but it always keeps going. Life keeps going. So that's what we try to focus on, but we take time for ourselves, and that's big mental health help right there. So I don't know if you have any other closing things you want to say and maybe give us a little wrap into what we might be talking about coming up here in the next episode.
Sure, sure. So, yeah, I just thought about the exercise where if you take away all of the titles that we have, all the roles that we have. And so instead of introducing yourself, say you're meeting somebody, you introduce yourself, hi, I'm so and I do this for work, or I do this for fun, or this is who I am. If you take away all of those titles, those nouns, look at the adjectives underneath. I am a caring person. I am a creative person. I like to do this. So looking at those things underneath, that's what really describes you or how you describe yourself. So that activity is so cool because coming from, I recently lost my corporate job last year. And so having to redefine myself as to who I wanted to be, what my interests are, where I wanted to go next on this journey it's been challenging, but it's been exciting as well. And to see and not being able to identify myself, I'm Anna and I do this at my corporate job and I do these hobbies, but instead saying I am creative. I like to speak with people and help people. And having that all described, that really is very helpful in seeing, okay, how do I identify myself now? And how do I want to identify myself? And it really helps to zoom in, zoom out, and create the role that we want. So next week we're going to build on this. We're going to, as we connected with ourselves beyond the roles and patterns and responses, it changes the way that we move about our daily life. And we kind of touched on this today too. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about habits, routines, and sustainable regulation practices. Really what it looks like to build a life that's rooted in balance and regulation rather than stress, survival, what's next, any trauma driven productivity or trauma driven responses, as well as what we have conditioned or been conditioned to respond in our day to day lives.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that. You know how much I love that for sure. But it is something that I do enjoy talking about and do get into because I've definitely been stressful, survivor mode my whole life, and trauma, of course. All those three
Oh,
things are on the menu throughout my whole life. So the thing is, I think everybody has it, and it's, yeah, I feel better that I'm not rooted in all those things and started to balance my life better to be able to not just be in survival mode or stressed out all the time because a as overachievers and overthinkers and people pleasing, we do too much. And so, stress driven and survival mode and all that stuff really pushes us to get things done. And we love when we do that. We love when we get things done. Accomplishments is dopamine. But we can come from a better place to do that. And I can't wait to get into that with you and share the balance that really does make this whole thing go around. But this has been another great episode of Mental Health Monday. For the lovely Anna and myself, Bryon, we will see you another time.